New reaction to those Russian fighter jets buzzing a U.S. destroyer in the Baltic Sea. Secretary of State John Kerry coming down hard on the Russians, saying, quote, "We condemn this kind of behavior. It is reckless, it is provocative, it is dangerous, and under the rules of engagement that could have been a shoot down. People need to understand that this is serious business, and the United States is not going to be intimidated on the high seas." Кейти Макфарланд is a Fox News national security analyst and a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration, and she joins us now to provide a little more insight. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So you heard Kerry's response today, a little bit stronger than what we heard yesterday, but is it still just all words and no action? What should we be doing?
You know, it's really good that you point that out, Heather, because let's contrast what Secretary Kerry said with what the Russian press release was, what the Russian general said. Kerry said, well, this is bad, this is provocative, they shouldn't be doing it, it's not playing by the rules. The Russians said, whoa, what are you worried about? This is just fine, there's no problem here. And yet, look at what they were both doing. Secretary Kerry, the United States, President Obama, they're not really doing much about this. They've cut back on the defense budget, they've cut back on the defense program, they've cut back on missile defense in Europe, and yet at the same time the Russians, they've increased their defense budget, they're increasing their aggressiveness throughout the world, and they're sort of challenging the United States everywhere, in the Baltics, in the Balkans, in the Black Sea, and even on the coast of the United States coast with Alaska.
Yeah, an increase in the flybys of the Russian Bear bombers. I was going to mention that. And we were actually just talking to Jennifer Griffin about the cuts in the military and the impact that it's having with our military members. So Putin's goal is just to what? Show that they're bigger and badder and that President Obama and his administration isn't going to do anything?
Yeah, I think it's several things. I mean, Putin understands and he sees President Obama as weak, as passive, as indecisive, and as a lame duck. So Putin wants to take full advantage of the next 9 months because he doesn't know what he gets next. He doesn't know if he's going to have a strong Reagan-like president to confront him next. So you're going to see more and more of these incidents. So he wants to, get what he can. He also wants to humiliate the United States. And finally, I think there's a second and really more important and more lethal potential goal of Putin. I think he wants to show that NATO is a paper tiger. I think he wants to show, look, we can do this, we get away with it. Secretary Kerry makes speeches, the president condemns us, nothing much happens. What is their goal? What could they do to NATO in the next 9 months? I think they could do very much like what they did in Ukraine. They invade, but it's not really an invasion. They know that if they had an armed invasion, it would trigger a NATO response, since those countries are NATO members. But if they do incremental stuff, like what they've just done now, if they have hybrid attacks, then they'll get away with it. And I think that's where Putin goes in the next 9 months.
So not a coincidence that the first day of these 2 days of the latest buzz-bys of the U.S. destroyer, that first day, a Polish helicopter was there, and it was training at the time.
Yeah, and just think of how provocative and, frankly, how the opportunity for mistakes could happen. The second day, the Russian fighter came within 30 feet of the U.S. destroyer. I mean, that's like, first down in a football game. And so the opportunity and the likelihood that any little thing could have gone wrong. The wind speed could have slightly changed. A couple of waves in the ocean, and they would have had a collision. Then you would have had a provocative action, potentially a crisis that would spin out of control very quickly.
And that we do not want. An accidental war, I believe you called it.
Yeah,
it was so close and so low, it actually created a wake. Кейти Макфарланд joining us. We always appreciate your insight. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Heather. You too.